"Papa, please don't leave me. Not today. Not like this." Those were the last words Elena Torres sobbed into her father's chest as he took his final breath in that sterile hospital room overlooking Seattle's gray skyline. But she couldn't process what her eyes were seeing when barely 36 hours after her father's death, 36 hours after she'd watched them lower the only person who'd ever truly loved her into the ground, her husband Brett was standing at a courthouse signing a marriage license to marry his mistress Kristen, the woman who'd whispered "finally" when Elena's father's heart monitor flatlined. Elena stood there, 6 months pregnant with a baby that would never meet its grandfather, clutching her father's worn flannel shirt that still smelled like sawdust and Old Spice, watching through tears as her husband married his mistress while her father's grave was still fresh, the dirt still under her fingernails from placing wildflowers on his casket that very morning. But what shattered Elena's heart into pieces so small she could barely breathe wasn't just watching her husband marry another woman 36 hours after her father died. It was the sealed envelope trembling in her hands, the envelope her dying father had pressed into her palm with his last ounce of strength, whispering in Spanish, "Mija cuando me vaya abra esto." "You are never alone. You are never poor. You are never powerless. I made sure of that." What Brett didn't know as he kissed his new wife on lips that should have been comforting his grieving, pregnant wife, what Kristen didn't know as she smiled in triumph over the broken woman still wearing funeral black, was that Elena's father, the humble construction worker who'd framed houses in the rain for 40 years, who'd worked Christmas shifts so Elena could have presents, who'd eaten beans and rice for dinner so she could take art classes, wasn't just a construction worker. He was Carlos Torres, secretly worth $6.3 billion, who'd walked away from his family's empire to teach his daughter that character matters more than cash, that love is worth more than luxury, that a good heart is the only treasure that truly counts. And in exactly 3 hours and 12 minutes, when Elena's hands finally stopped shaking enough to open that envelope at her attorney's office, when she inherited $6 billion, Kristen would let out a scream so raw, so full of horror and realization that it would echo through that parking garage like a wounded animal. "Oh my God, Brett, you left a billionaire. You divorced a billionaire for me. What have we done?" Listen to me. If you have ever felt abandoned, betrayed, or underestimated, you need to hit that subscribe button right now because Elena's story is about to show you that sometimes the people who leave you do you the biggest favor of your life. Smash that like button if you believe in karma, if you believe good people deserve justice, if you believe that love, real love, is the only thing that lasts forever. And comment below telling me, have you ever lost someone who loved you more than life itself? Tell me about them. Honor them. Because this story is for everyone who's ever been protected by someone who saw their worth when nobody else did. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and approaching death. Elena had been sitting in that same vinyl chair for 19 hours straight, her hand wrapped around her father's calloused palm, watching the monitors measure out his last moments in beeps and numbers that kept getting slower, quieter, weaker. Carlos Torres, or as the world knew him, just another construction worker in a city full of them, lay beneath white sheets that made his weathered brown skin look gray, made him look smaller than he'd ever been in Elena's eyes. He'd always been larger than life to her, the man who taught her to hammer nails straight on Saturday mornings before his shift, the man who showed up to every parent-teacher conference in his work clothes, smelling like lumber and effort, sitting in those tiny chairs with such pride that it didn't matter what he wore or how tired he looked. The man who told her every single night before bed, in Spanish then in English, "Eres brillante. Eres digna. Eres amada más allá de toda medida." You are brilliant. You are worthy. You are loved beyond measure. And now he was leaving her. The cancer had come fast and vicious, liver cancer stage 4. 2 months from diagnosis to this moment. By the time they caught it, the doctors had said maybe 4 months with aggressive treatment. He'd made it barely 8 weeks. Elena's phone buzzed in her lap. She glanced at the screen through tears that wouldn't stop falling. Her husband, Brett. The text read, "Still at the hospital? Client dinner got pushed to tonight. Probably won't make it back before midnight. Don't wait up." She stared at the words, something cold settling in her chest beneath the grief. Her father was dying right now, this moment, and Brett was worried about a client dinner. She didn't respond. She turned the phone face down and squeezed her father's hand tighter. His eyes fluttered open, still sharp, still her papa's eyes, even as everything else was shutting down. "Elena," he whispered, his voice like sandpaper. "Mi hija hermosa. I'm here, Papa. I'm right here. Need to tell you something important." He struggled to breathe, the ventilator hissing beside him. "Listen carefully. Save your strength. We can talk when you're better." "No, Mija." His grip tightened with surprising force. No more pretending. This is it. And you need to know everything. Elena's tears fell faster, splashing onto their joined hands. Papa, please. In my apartment, he continued, each word an effort. Bedroom closet. Red toolbox. False bottom. There's a key. Safety deposit box. Pacific Northwest Bank. Box 2847. He coughed, his whole body shaking with the effort. Everything you need is there. Everything I should have told you years ago. I don't understand. You will. His eyes found hers, and in them she saw something she'd never seen before. Not fear of dying, but fear of leaving her unprepared. Promise me. Promise you'll go. Promise you won't tell anyone until you understand. I promise. Not Brett. His voice gained sudden strength, clarity born of urgency. Especially not Brett. Elena's breath caught. What? Why? Because I see him, Mija. I see how he looks at you now that you're pregnant, now that I'm sick. Like you're a burden instead of a blessing. His breathing was getting shallower, more labored. I added something to my will 4 weeks ago. Protection for you. For my granddaughter. Papa, what are you talking about? But the machines were changing their rhythm. The beeps spreading further apart, becoming irregular. A nurse rushed in, checked the monitors, and her face told Elena everything. Mr. Torres, the nurse said gently, do you want us to? No, Carlos whispered. No machines. Just my daughter. The nurse nodded, squeezed Elena's shoulder once, and quietly left, closing the door behind them. Carlos looked at Elena, and despite everything, he smiled, that same smile that had greeted her every day of her life, full of unconditional love and pride. You know what the best day of my life was? Elena shook her head, unable to speak past the sob lodged in her throat. The day your mama put you in my arms. You were so tiny, so perfect, red-faced and screaming at the world. He laughed softly, the sound wet and labored. And I looked at you and I thought, this is it. This is what I was born for. Not money, not power, not all the things my family tried to make me want. Just you. Just loving you. Mama. Elena's voice broke. Her mother had died when Elena was 3, cervical cancer, too young, too fast. She barely remembered her. She was a teacher, Carlos said, his eyes distant now, seeing something Elena couldn't. Beautiful, brilliant, kind. Everything good in this world. My family hated her. Said she wasn't good enough, wasn't our class, wasn't worthy of the Torres name. His jaw tightened even now, all these years later. They gave me a choice, her or the inheritance. What inheritance? I chose her, Mija. Every time I chose love. He coughed again harder. And when she died, when the cancer took her from us, I chose you. I walked away from billions to raise you right, to teach you what actually matters. Elena's head was spinning. Billions? Papa, what? My real name is Carlos Eduardo Torres Mendoza. Each word was getting harder for him. Torres Industrial Group. My grandfather's empire. Construction, real estate, manufacturing across the Americas. I was supposed to take over, supposed to marry some socialite my mother picked out. But I met your mama at a community college where she was teaching ESL classes to immigrants like me. His smile was soft with memory. And I knew she was my real life. So I left. Changed my name legally, got a job swinging hammers, and I never regretted it. Not once. You've been rich this whole time? Elena couldn't process it. Her father, who'd worked double shifts, who'd driven a truck held together with prayer and duct tape, who'd packed her peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day because that's what they could afford. Not rich, Mija. Wealthy. There's a difference. He coughed, the sound rattling in his chest. Rich is what you have. Wealthy is what you are. And you, my darling girl, are the wealthiest person I know. You have character, integrity, a heart so big it terrifies me sometimes. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to grow up normal. To marry someone who loved you, not your bank account. To know your own strength. His breathing was labored now, each word a battle. But I never stopped managing it, the money, the businesses, growing it, protecting it for you. The monitors were screaming now. Elena wanted to call the nurses back, but she couldn't let go of his hand. Couldn't waste these final seconds. The envelope, Carlos gasped. In the deposit box. It explains everything. The trust, the protections. And Mija, he pulled her close with his last bit of strength. Trust the plan. I know it's going to hurt. I know what's coming. But trust the plan. What's coming, Papa? What do you mean? But his eyes were closing. You are never alone. You are never poor. You are never powerless. I made sure of that. Papa, no. I love you, Elena. More than all the money in the world. You are my greatest treasure. Mi tesoro más grande. And then he was gone. Just like that. The machines flatlined. The sound pierced through Elena like a physical wound. She collapsed onto his chest, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe, clutching his worn flannel shirt, breathing in the smell of him one last time, sawdust and Old Spice and coffee and love that would never fade. She didn't hear the door open. Didn't hear the nurses come in. Didn't hear them gently tell her it was time to let go. All she heard was the silence where her father's voice used to be. And in her pocket, her phone buzzed again. Brett, dinner's running long. Probably just gonna crash at Mike's place. You good? Elena stared at the text through tears, her father's words echoing in her mind. I see how he looks at you, like you're a burden instead of a blessing. The rain came down in sheets over Evergreen Memorial Cemetery, turning the earth to mud and the world to gray. Elena stood at the edge of her father's grave, her black dress soaked through, her hand resting on her swollen belly as the priest's words blurred into meaningless sound. She couldn't hear him over the roar in her head, over the desperate voice screaming that this couldn't be real, that any second now her papa would walk up behind her and say in Spanish, "Es solo una broma, amiga. I'm not going anywhere." But the simple pine casket being lowered into the ground said different. The wildflowers she'd placed on top, his favorite California poppies, were already beaten down by rain, petals washing away into the mud like hope dissolving. There were maybe 40 people there. Former co-workers from the construction company, neighbors from their apartment building, some families whose homes her father had helped build over the years, people whose rent he'd quietly paid when they were short, whose groceries he'd bought when he knew they were struggling. Her father had lived quietly, loved deeply, and died leaving a hole in the world that felt too big for Elena to survive. Brett stood beside her, but he might as well have been on another planet. He held an umbrella over his own head, not hers. He checked his phone every few minutes, his jaw tight with barely concealed impatience. When the priest said, "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust," Brett sighed loud enough for Elena to hear it over the rain. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. This man who'd promised to love her in sickness and health, for better or worse, couldn't even pretend to care that she'd just lost everything. After the service, as people filed past offering condolences Elena would never remember, Brett leaned close and whispered, "I need to head out. Got a meeting with a potential investor." Elena turned to him slowly, rain streaming down her face mixing with tears. "A meeting? Brett, we just buried my father. I know, babe, and I'm sorry, but this deal has been in the works for weeks. I can't just. Your wife just buried her father." Her voice was flat. "That. And you have a meeting." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Look, you've got people here. You'll be fine. I'll see you at home later." He kissed her forehead, quick, perfunctory, the way you'd pat a dog, and walked away through the rain toward the parking lot, pulling out his phone before he'd even made it to his car. Elena watched him go, something breaking inside her that she didn't have a name for yet. An elderly woman approached, Mrs. Chin, who'd worked in the office at her father's construction company. She pulled Elena into a fierce hug that smelled like roses and rain. "Your father was the finest man I ever knew," she whispered in Elena's ear. "He talked about you every single day. You were his whole world, Mija." Elena couldn't speak. She just nodded, her throat too tight for words. "He told me something 3 weeks ago," Mrs. Chin continued, pulling back to look Elena in the eyes. "He said, Rosa, my baby girl is stronger than she knows. And soon she's going to need every bit of that strength." I didn't understand what he meant then. She squeezed Elena's hands. "But whatever you're facing, whatever's coming, you've got your papa's blood in you. That means you've got steel in your spine." The old woman walked away, leaving Elena standing alone in the rain, those words echoing. Whatever's coming. Her father had known. Somehow he'd known. That night, Elena sat alone in her father's tiny apartment in Rainier Valley, surrounded by the life he'd built. The worn couch he'd owned for 25 years. The TV that only got basic channels. The kitchen table where he'd helped her with homework every night, where they'd eaten countless dinners together, where he'd taught her that the best conversations happened over simple food and genuine love. She should have been packing his things, sorting through belongings, doing all the practical tasks that come after death. But she couldn't move. She just sat there wearing his flannel shirt, breathing in the fading smell of him, trying to understand what he'd meant about the safety deposit box, about protection, about being a Torres Mendoza. Her phone rang. "Brett." "Hey," he said, background noise loud behind him, music, laughter, the clink of glasses. "Just checking in. You okay? Where are you?" "Just grabbed dinner with the team. You know how it is. Had to decompress after the funeral. Heavy day. Heavy day. Like he'd been the one lowering his father-in-law into the ground. When are you coming home? Probably late. We might hit up another spot after this. You should get some rest. You look exhausted. I look exhausted? Her voice cracked. Brett, I buried my father today. I know, babe. That's why I'm saying you should rest. He sounded irritated now, like she was being unreasonable. Look, I gotta go. Order some food. Take a bath. I'll see you tomorrow. He hung up before she could respond. Elena sat there staring at her phone, and that's when she saw it, a notification at the top of the screen. Brett's Instagram had been tagged in a photo. Her hands shook as she opened it. There he was at some upscale waterfront restaurant she'd never heard of, sitting in a booth with exposed brick and Edison bulbs. And next to him, pressed close, laughing at something he'd said, was a woman Elena had never seen before. Beautiful, polished, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. The caption read, "To new chapters and fresh starts, clinking glasses at Brett Sullivan at Kristen Wade." Kristen Wade. Elena had heard the name before. Brett mentioned her sometimes. His supervisor at the tech startup where he worked, the woman he was always having strategy sessions with, the reason for all those late nights. Elena clicked on Kristen's profile. It was public, full of photos of expensive restaurants, weekend trips to Vancouver and Portland, designer clothes and success carefully curated. And there, 4 photos down, was another one of them, Brett and Kristen at a Seahawks game, his arm around her waist, her hand on his chest, both of them smiling like they'd won the lottery. Posted 7 weeks ago. While Elena's father was dying. While Elena was spending every night at the hospital. While her world was ending. The caption, "When you know, 2 hearts." Elena's vision blurred. She scrolled further back. More photos. Brett and Kristen at a concert. At the San Juan Islands. At what looked like a hotel room, though that one was carefully cropped to show only their faces, champagne glasses raised. The affair had been going on for months. Maybe longer. While Elena was pregnant with his child. While her father was dying. While she was drowning in grief and fear and loneliness, Brett had been building a whole other life with someone else. She ran to the bathroom and vomited, her body rejecting the reality like poison. When she finally stopped shaking, she looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Her face was pale. Her pregnant belly pushed against her father's oversized flannel shirt. She looked exactly like what she was, a broken woman who'd lost everything. And in that moment, staring at her own devastated reflection, Elena made a decision. Tomorrow she would go to the bank. She would open that safety deposit box. She would find out what her father meant about being a Torres Mendoza, about protection, about never being powerless. Because right now she felt like the most powerless person on earth. Her phone buzzed. A text from Brett. "By the way, we need to talk when I get home tomorrow. Something important we should discuss." Those words. The ones that never mean anything good. Elena knew what was coming. She could feel it in her bones, the way you feel an earthquake before it hits. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that in exactly 14 hours her entire world would flip upside down in ways she couldn't imagine. She pulled the sealed envelope from her purse, the one her father had pressed into her palm with his dying breath. Her name was written across it in his familiar handwriting. Elena, mi tesoro. Not yet. She wasn't ready yet. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she'd find out what her father had been protecting her from, and protecting for her, all these years. Tonight she just needed to sit in his apartment, wrapped in his shirt, and pretend for a few more hours that she was still just Elena Torres, construction worker's daughter, pregnant and grieving and alone. Because tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. Elena hadn't slept. She'd spent the night on her father's couch, clutching his flannel shirt, staring at the ceiling, waiting for Brett to come home. He never did. At 7:30 a.m. her phone buzzed. A text, crashed at Mike's. Coming by at 9. We need to talk. Important. Elena's hands went to her belly, to her daughter. The doctor had told her last week it was a girl. The baby kicked hard like she could feel her mother's fear. "It's okay, pequeña," Elena whispered in Spanish. "We're going to be okay. Your abuelo promised. We just have to trust the plan." But she had no idea what the plan was. At 8:45, Elena forced herself to shower, to put on clean clothes, to look like a person instead of a ghost. She chose simple jeans and a black sweater because everything else felt too bright, too alive for how she felt inside. She made coffee she wouldn't drink. Sat at the small kitchen table. Waited. Brett arrived at 9:20, which meant he'd made her wait on purpose. Power play. She recognized it now, wondered how many other small cruelties she'd missed while loving him. He looked good. Rested. Like he hadn't just attended his father-in-law's funeral yesterday. He was wearing cologne, expensive stuff he'd never worn around her. Elena wondered if he'd been with Kristen all night. "Hey," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "How are you feeling?" "How do you think I'm feeling, Brett?" "I buried my father yesterday." "Right. Yeah." He sat down across from her and she saw it then, the manila folder in his hand. The kind lawyers use. Her heart started hammering. "Look, there's no easy way to say this." He slid the folder across the table. "I want a divorce." The words hit her like a physical blow. Even though she'd known, even though she'd seen it coming, hearing them out loud made them real in a way that stole her breath. "What?" "I'm not happy, Elena. I haven't been for a long time." His voice was rehearsed, practiced. "We've grown apart. You've been so focused on your dad's illness and I need something different. Someone who's going places. My dad just died yesterday." Her voice didn't sound like her own. "Yesterday, Brett. And you're asking me for a divorce today? The timing isn't ideal, I know, but..." "Isn't ideal?" She laughed, a broken sound. "I'm 6 months pregnant with your baby. My father, the only family I had left, just died. And the timing isn't ideal? I know it's hard, but prolonging this doesn't help anyone." He was using his pitch voice now, the one he used to close deals. "I've already talked to a lawyer. Can be simple, clean. You can keep this place, it's paid off, right? I'll pay child support. We can both move on with our lives." "Move on?" Elena's hands were shaking. "To what? To who?" She pulled out her phone, opened Instagram, shoved it across the table showing Kristen's profile, the photos, the timeline, the evidence of months of betrayal. Brett's face went carefully blank. "Elena. How long?" Her voice rose. "How long have you been sleeping with your boss while I was watching my father die? It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" She was shouting now, something she never did. "Tell me, Brett. What is it like to cheat on your pregnant wife while her father is dying of cancer? What is it like to attend his funeral and then go celebrate with your mistress? What is it like? Don't make this ugly." His jaw tightened. "I didn't plan for this to happen. Kristen and we connect on a level you and I never did. She's ambitious, driven, successful. She understands the life I want to build." Every word was a knife. "And what am I?" "You were my wife." Past tense. "You're a good person, Elena. You really are. But you were never going to be enough. Not for the life I want. Your dad was a construction worker. You're a freelance graphic designer who barely makes rent. Kristen has a 6-figure salary, connections, a future. I need a partner who can match my ambition." The cruelty of it took her breath away. "I'm pregnant with your child." "I know. And I'll support the baby financially. I'm not a monster." He stood up, buttoned his jacket. "But I can't stay in a marriage that's holding me back just because of biology. Sign the papers. My lawyer will be in touch about the details. I'll come by this weekend to get my stuff." "Brett, please." She hated the begging in her voice, hated that even now, even after everything, some part of her wanted him to stay. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes was worse than anger. It was pity. "You'll be okay, Elena. You're strong. Your dad raised you to survive. You'll figure it out." And then he left. Just walked out. Left her sitting there 6 months pregnant, freshly orphaned, with divorce papers on the table and a future that looked like an abyss. Elena sat in the silence, her father's words echoing. "I see how he looks at you, like you're a burden instead of a blessing." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi Elena. This is Kristen. I know this must be difficult for you, but Brett and I are in love. We'd appreciate your discretion and cooperation during this transition. We're planning to marry as soon as the divorce is finalized. Thank you for understanding." The audacity. The sheer, breathtaking audacity. Something shifted in Elena then. Something cold and clear and sharp. She picked up her keys, grabbed her father's flannel shirt, grabbed the sealed envelope and drove to Pacific Northwest Bank. It was time to find out what her father had meant about never being powerless. The bank was old Seattle money, marble floors, soaring ceilings, the kind of quiet that wealth buys. Elena walked up to the customer service desk, her pregnant belly leading the way, and said, "I need to access safety deposit box 2847. The woman's fingers flew over her keyboard. Then she paused, looked up at Elena with new eyes, something like recognition mixed with surprise. "One moment, please. I need to get the regional manager. A distinguished man in an expensive suit appeared within 2 minutes. Miss Torres Mendoza, he said, his voice respectful in a way the receptionist hadn't been. I'm Gerald Whitmore, regional manager. Please follow me. Torres Mendoza. He'd used both names. How did he know? He led her to a private room with mahogany walls and leather chairs, used 2 keys to open the box, his and the one Elena had found in her father's toolbox, and then quietly excused himself. Take all the time you need, Miss Torres Mendoza. If you need anything at all, press this button. I'll come immediately. Inside the box was a large envelope, thick with documents. And on top, a letter in her father's familiar handwriting. Elena's hands shook as she opened it. Mi querida Elena, mi tesoro más grande. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And you're probably confused, maybe scared, definitely grieving. I'm so sorry I'm not there to explain this in person, to hold you while you process it, to see your face when you realize who you really are. But Mija, it's time you knew the truth about the Torres family, about me, about everything I've been protecting you from, and protecting for you, all these years. Elena read the whole thing, tears streaming down her face, her mind struggling to process what her father was telling her. He was Carlos Eduardo Torres Mendoza, heir to a construction and real estate empire that stretched from Seattle to Mexico City. He'd walked away at 24 to marry her mother, the ESL teacher his family said wasn't good enough. He'd changed his name legally, taken a job framing houses, built a real life based on love instead of money. But he'd never given up the inheritance. He'd just hidden it, managed it quietly through lawyers and trustees, let it grow exponentially over 4 decades, protected it for her. And 4 weeks before he died, knowing what Brett would do, he'd restructured everything, put it all in an irrevocable trust that Brett could never touch, not even if they were still married. The total estate value as of this month, $6.3 billion. Elena read that number 5 times. 6 billion. With AB. Her father, her papa who'd eaten beans and rice for dinner so she could have art supplies, who'd driven a truck with 200,000 miles so she could go to college, had been worth $6.3 billion. And he'd left every penny of it to her. There was a final section that made her sob out loud. I know what Brett is going to do, Mija. I've seen it in his eyes for months now. The way he looks at you when you're not watching, like you're a burden he's carrying instead of a blessing he received. He's going to leave you. He's going to hurt you in ways that will make you question everything. But I need you to understand something, mi amor. Him leaving is the greatest gift he could give you. Because now you'll know. You'll know that when he chose to go, he had no idea what he was walking away from. He left you because he thought you were poor, because he thought you were weak, because he thought his mistress with her 6-figure salary was a better bet. And Elena, my darling daughter, I need you to let him go. Let him marry his mistress. Let him build his little life. And when you're ready, when you've healed, you show him, and her, and the whole world exactly who Elena Torres Mendoza really is. Not with cruelty. Not with revenge. But by building a life so beautiful, so meaningful, so powerful that they spend the rest of their days choking on regret. That's the Torres way, Mija. We don't destroy our enemies. We simply become so magnificent they destroy themselves watching us rise. Trust the plan, baby girl. I love you more than all the billions in the world. Tu papá que te ama para siempre, Carlos. Elena sat in that room for 2 hours, reading and rereading every document, every letter, every piece of her father's secret life. Stock certificates. Property deeds. Corporate documents showing she now owned controlling interest in Torres Industrial Group and 17 subsidiary companies. Then she pulled out her phone and called the law firm whose card was attached to the documents. Torres and Associates. A man answered on the first ring. Miss Torres Mendoza. We've been expecting your call. Miss Torres Mendoza, I'm Miguel Reyes, managing partner of Torres and Associates. I'm also your cousin. Your father was my Uncle Carlos. I'd very much like to meet with you to explain everything and begin the transition of assets. Would today work? I can come to you, or I can send a car to bring you to our offices. Elena's voice was hollow, distant. My husband just asked me for a divorce this morning. Day after my father's funeral. I know. Miguel's voice was gentle but unsurprised. Your father predicted that would happen. He had me prepare something specific for exactly that scenario. Elena, I'm so sorry for your loss. Uncle Carlos was the finest man I ever knew. But I promise you he's still protecting you. Everything is in place. Everything is going to be more than okay. 3 hours later, Elena sat in a corner office on the 52nd floor of the Columbia Center, downtown Seattle spread out beneath her like a kingdom she hadn't known existed. Miguel Reyes was in his early 50s, with kind eyes and her father's smile, that same warmth that made you feel safe. With him were two others, Patricia Kim, a sharp-eyed woman who specialized in wealth management, and David Martinez, an accountant who'd been managing her father's portfolio for 20 years. "These are your people now," Miguel said gently. "They work for you. Everything we're about to show you, everything we're about to explain, it's all yours, Elena. You're not just inheriting money. You're inheriting an empire your father built while working construction 40 hours a week and raising you as a single parent. What he accomplished is extraordinary." Over the next 3 hours they walked Elena through everything. She owned controlling shares in Torres Industrial Group, construction, real estate development, manufacturing plants in 7 states and Mexico. She owned commercial properties across the Pacific Northwest, a stock portfolio worth $2.1 billion. Art her father had quietly collected over 40 years, now valued at $340 million. Liquid assets totaling $800 million in various accounts. "Your father lived on his construction salary," Patricia explained. "Every penny from the businesses he reinvested or saved. He never touched it. He wanted you to grow up normal, to understand the value of work, to marry someone who loved you for you." "And then Brett happened," Elena said bitterly. Miguel's expression darkened. "Brett visited your father in the hospital. 4 weeks ago, 2 days before Uncle Carlos called me to restructure everything." Elena's breath caught. "Brett told me he couldn't get away from work. He said he was too busy." "He spent 20 minutes complaining," Miguel said, pulling out a file. "Hospital staff documented it because Uncle Carlos requested it. Brett complained about medical bills, about how your pregnancy was bad timing for his career trajectory, about how he felt trapped. He asked if your father had life insurance to offset the burden." The words hit Elena like punches. "The burden. He called me a burden." "Your father heard every word," Miguel said quietly. "The moment Brett left, Uncle Carlos called me. He said, 'Miguel, my son-in-law just showed me exactly who he is. Make absolutely certain he can never touch a penny of Elena's inheritance. Not 1 cent ever.'" Miguel slid a document across the table, an ironclad trust structure. "Even if you were still married, even if you wanted to give Brett money, you legally couldn't for 5 years. Your father made it impossible for anyone to take advantage of you during your grief." Elena felt tears sliding down her face. "He knew. He knew Brett would leave me. And he made sure that when Brett walked away, he'd have no idea what he was walking away from." Miguel's smile turned sharp. "Now let's talk about what comes next." Patricia leaned forward. "Your father already established the Torres Foundation with a $400 million endowment. It's designed to help women in crisis, single mothers, women escaping financial abuse, women who feel powerless. It's ready whenever you are." "I'm ready now," Elena said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "But first I want to host a launch gala. I want to invite Seattle's business community, potential board members, donors, people who can help amplify this work." She pulled out her phone, opened Kristen's LinkedIn profile. "She's a senior director at a major tech company. Connected, ambitious, successful. Exactly the kind of person a new foundation would want to cultivate a relationship with, right?" Miguel's smile turned knowing. "Along with her new husband, of course." "Of course." Elena's eyes were dry now, clear. "They should both be there to see what my father built. What I'm going to do with his legacy." "When?" Patricia asked. 3 weeks. That's how long it takes to get a marriage license and have a courthouse wedding in Washington state, isn't it?" Elena's voice was calm. "I want them married. I want them happy. I want them celebrating their victory. And then I want them at that gala." Miguel studied her carefully. "Your father told me you had his steel spine. He was right. He also told me the Torres way isn't revenge," Elena said. "It's becoming so magnificent that our enemies destroy themselves. So let's give them a front row seat to their own destruction." 2 days later, Elena signed the divorce papers. She didn't cry. She sat in her father's apartment, placed her signature on every page and felt nothing but relief. Brett could have his freedom. He could have Kristen. He could have whatever small life they built together. She was building something else entirely. The invitations went out 1 week later, elegant cream cardstock with gold embossing. "The Torres Foundation cordially invites you to an evening of hope and transformation Friday, November 12th, 7 p.m. The Seattle Art Museum black tie." Kristen received hers at her office. She showed it to Brett immediately, her eyes bright with ambition. "This could be huge for my career. New foundation, serious money behind it. If I could get on their board." She RSVP'd yes within an hour, adding +1 for her husband. Brett, now living in Kristen's downtown condo, barely glanced at the invitation. He was too busy job hunting. He'd left his position to avoid the awkwardness of working under his new wife, and too focused on the wedding they'd planned for the following week. Small courthouse ceremony. Just them and 2 witnesses. Quick, efficient, uncomplicated. Everything Kristen wanted. It's perfect, she told her friends over cocktails. No drama, no extended family, no expensive production. Just 2 successful people starting their future together. What she didn't say, what none of her friends knew, was that Brett had lied about his finances. She'd thought he had savings, investments, a solid foundation. Instead, he had credit card debt, a lease on a BMW he couldn't afford, and 0 actual assets. But Kristen made enough for both of them, she reasoned. His ambition would catch up eventually. The wedding happened exactly 21 days after Carlos Torres's funeral. Tuesday morning at the King County Courthouse. No flowers, no music, no celebration beyond a lunch at a trendy restaurant where Kristen posted carefully curated photos to Instagram. The caption, Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan ring. Sometimes the best things aren't planned, they just happen. #new beginnings, #happily ever after. Elena saw the post. Miguel had set up alerts. She stared at the photos of Brett kissing his new wife on courthouse steps, of them toasting with champagne, of Kristen's left hand showcasing her new wedding ring. 21 days after her father died. Less than 3 weeks. You okay? Miguel asked. He'd insisted on being with her when the wedding happened. Yes, Elena said, and meant it. Because now I know exactly who he is. And in 3 days he's going to know exactly who I am. She placed her hand on her belly, on her daughter who kicked strong and healthy. Your papa was right, Pequeña. Sometimes the people who leave you do you the biggest favor of your life. The Seattle Art Museum glowed like a jewel box on the night of the gala. Elena arrived early, 8 months pregnant now, wearing an emerald silk gown that had been custom-made to accommodate her belly, diamond earrings that had belonged to her Torres Mendoza grandmother, her dark hair swept up to show them off. She looked expensive. She looked powerful. She looked exactly like who she was. Miguel stood beside her as guests began arriving, Seattle's elite tech executives, philanthropists, politicians, people whose donations could change lives, whose connections could amplify the foundation's reach. At 7:30, Brett and Kristen walked in. Elena saw them before they saw her. Brett uncomfortable in a rented tuxedo that didn't fit quite right, looking around nervously at wealth he couldn't touch. Kristen confident in her red designer dress, scanning the room for important people to impress, for opportunities to seize. Miguel stepped to the front of the room, his voice carrying over the elegant crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. I'd like to introduce our founder and director, my cousin Ms. Elena Torres Mendoza. Elena stepped forward into the light. Every eye in the room turned to her. Including Brett's. Including Kristen's. She watched recognition hit them. Watched Brett's face drain of all color. Watched Kristen's champagne glass freeze halfway to her lips. Elena's smile was gracious, warm, devastating. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice steady and clear. 3 weeks ago, I lost my father. A construction worker who taught me that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in lives you touch and integrity you carry. Brett gripped the back of a chair, his knuckles white. What I didn't know, Elena continued, was that my father, Carlos Torres Mendoza, had walked away from his family's empire 40 years ago to marry the woman he loved, my mother. He chose love over money. He raised me in a small apartment, working with his hands, teaching me to value character over cash. Her eyes found Brett's across the room. When he passed, he left me his entire estate, Torres Industrial Group and all subsidiary holdings, valued at approximately $6.3 billion. The room erupted in murmurs. Kristen's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. But more than that, he left me a mission, Elena said. To help women who feel powerless, abandoned, underestimated. Because 3 weeks ago, I was one of those women. The room had gone completely silent. Every eye was on Elena, but she only saw 2 faces, Brett's, drained of all color, and Kristen's, frozen in dawning horror. Elena continued, her voice never wavering. I was 8 months pregnant, grieving my father's death, when my husband asked me for a divorce. The day after the funeral. The day after I'd buried the only person who'd ever truly loved me unconditionally. Brett tried to move toward the exit, but the crowd had pressed in closer, blocking his path. Trap. He told me I would never be enough, Elena said, her eyes locked on Brett. That he needed someone successful, someone ambitious, someone going places. He told me his new partner understood the life he wanted to build, a life I could never be part of because I was just a construction worker's daughter. Kristen's hand flew to her mouth. Around them, people were murmuring, phones discreetly emerging to record this moment. He divorced me thinking I had nothing. Elena's voice grew stronger. Thinking he was trading up. Thinking his new wife's six-figure salary made her the better choice. And I let him go. Because my father taught me something that man will never understand. You can't lose what's truly yours, and you can't keep what was never meant to stay. She placed her hand on her pregnant belly. This foundation is for every woman who's been told she's not enough. For every woman who's been abandoned when she needed support most. For every woman who's been underestimated because someone else couldn't see past appearances to recognize real worth. Elena raised her glass, her smile devastating in its grace. To new beginnings. To understanding your value. And to knowing that sometimes, the people who leave you are doing you the greatest favor of your life. The room erupted in applause. People rushed forward to congratulate her, to promise donations, to offer support. And in the back, Brett and Kristen stood frozen in their own private hell. Brett grabbed Kristen's arm roughly, pulling her toward the exit. They pushed through the crowd, Brett's face red with humiliation, Kristen's carefully applied makeup already running as realization crashed over her in waves. They made it to the parking garage before Kristen's composure completely shattered. The scream echoed off concrete walls, raw, primal, full of horror and rage and disbelief. "Oh my God, Brett." Her voice bounced between parked cars, feral and unhinged. "You left a billionaire. You divorced a billionaire for me." "I didn't know." Brett's voice was hollow, destroyed. "You didn't know?" Kristen was hysterical now, mascara streaming down her face in black rivers. Her father was a construction worker. You said she was poor. You said we were upgrading. You said I was the better option. She was poor. How was I supposed to know her father was secretly? $6.3 billion. Kristen's shriek bounced off the low ceiling. Not million. Not 100 million. Billion with a B. Do you understand what you lost? What you threw away? What I lost? Brett shot back, anger finally breaking through his shock. What about you? You pushed me to leave her. You said she was dragging me down. Because you told me she had nothing. Kristen's voice cracked. You said she was working some freelance graphic design gig barely making rent. You said her father was just a worker. You made it sound like I was rescuing you from poverty. She looked down at her wedding ring, the modest band Brett had been able to afford, and laughed. The sound was bitter, broken. I thought I won. I thought I got the prize. But she let you go, Brett. She let you walk away because you were nothing, and she knew it before we did. Kristen. I'm the other woman in a story where the wife is one of the richest people in Washington state, Kristen continued, her voice dropping to something more dangerous than screaming. My career, my reputation. Do you understand what this does to me? I'm the woman who helped a man divorce his pregnant wife while her father was dying. And she wasn't some nobody. She was a billionaire. Kristen pulled off her wedding ring and threw it at Brett. It bounced off his chest and clattered across the concrete. I can't be married to a man stupid enough to divorce $6 billion because he thought his secretary made better money. You're not my secretary, you were my supervisor. I was your supervisor, Kristen spat. Past tense. Because I quit my job to avoid the scandal of sleeping with a subordinate I convinced to leave his wife. And now I'm the idiot who married the man too blind to see what he had. She grabbed her purse from where she dropped it. This marriage is over, Brett. I'm filing for annulment first thing Monday morning. 23 days. That's how long we lasted. Because you divorced a woman worth more than we'll make in 1,000 lifetimes combined. Kristen, wait. But she was already walking away, her heels clicking sharply against concrete, leaving Brett alone in that parking garage with the ghost of his biggest mistake. He slumped against a concrete pillar, his rented tuxedo suddenly feeling like a costume, like he'd been playing dress-up in a world he'd never belonged to. His phone buzzed, notifications exploding as the story spread through social media. Someone at the gala had live-streamed Elena's speech. It was already going viral. Comments flooding in. This man divorced a billionaire while she was pregnant? Skull. The way she handled this with grace instead of revenge. Queen behavior. Imagine being so blinded by a six-figure salary that you walk away from $6 billion. Her father raised her right. Built an empire and taught her humility. That's real wealth. Brett scrolled through them, each one a knife twisting deeper. Then he saw the photos, Elena at the gala, radiant and powerful, surrounded by Seattle's elite. And beside those photos, screenshots from his own Instagram from 3 weeks ago, him and Kristen at their courthouse wedding, celebrating their victory. The juxtaposition told the whole story. And the internet was merciless. His phone rang. His mother. He declined it. Then his brother. Declined. Then former co-workers, old friends, people he'd bragged to about trading up, about leaving behind his dead-weight wife. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. How could you be so stupid? Brett sat on the cold concrete floor of that parking garage, his back against the pillar, and finally let himself feel the full weight of what he'd done. Not just losing money, though God $6.3 billion, but losing Elena. He remembered her at the gala, one hand on her pregnant belly, speaking about women who'd been abandoned and told they weren't enough. He'd done that. He'd made her feel worthless when she was priceless. He'd called her a burden when she was carrying his child. He'd left her crying at her father's funeral to go celebrate with his mistress. And her father had known. Carlos had seen right through him, had protected Elena with his dying breath, had made sure Brett could never touch what he'd been too blind to appreciate. Brett pulled out his phone and opened his photos. There was Elena on their wedding day, laughing in a simple white dress they'd bought on sale. Elena finding out she was pregnant, her face full of joy and terror. Elena at the hospital holding her father's hand, Brett in the background checking his phone, not even pretending to care. Every photo was evidence of his failure. Evidence of how he'd taken something precious and treated it like garbage. His phone buzzed again. This time a text from his former best friend Mike. "Dude, everyone's talking about this. You divorced Elena Torres? The Torres family? Are you insane? Do you have any idea what you lost?" Brett typed back, "Everything. I lost everything." Upstairs at the gala, Elena accepted congratulations, promises of support, business cards from people who wanted to help build the foundation into something transformative. Miguel stayed close, proud and protective. They left rather dramatically, he said quietly. Kristen was screaming in the parking garage. Security said it was spectacular. Elena felt nothing. No satisfaction. No triumph. Just calm certainty that she'd done exactly what her father would have wanted. "My father once told me," Elena said, watching the city lights sparkle through the museum's windows, "that the best revenge is building a life so beautiful your enemies destroy themselves watching it. He said the Torres way isn't to attack, it's to rise so high that small people become invisible." "He'd be incredibly proud of you tonight," Miguel said. "I know." Elena's hand rested on her belly, on her daughter who'd kicked through the entire speech like she was cheering her mother on. "I can feel it." A woman approached, older, elegant, with kind eyes. "Miss Torres Mendoza, I'm Patricia Chin, Director of Women's Crisis Center. Your father used to donate to us anonymously. Thousands every month for years. We had no idea who the donor was until tonight." Elena's eyes filled with tears. Of course he did. Of course her father had been helping people all along, even while pretending to be poor. "I'd like to continue those donations," Elena said. "And increase them. Significantly." Patricia's eyes widened. "That would save us. We're barely keeping our doors open. With proper funding we could help so many more women." "Then consider your doors permanently open," Elena said. "The Torres Foundation will fund your operation entirely. Whatever you need." As Patricia walked away, already on her phone making calls, Miguel leaned close. "You're going to change so many lives, Elena. Not just with money but with hope." "That's what Papa wanted," Elena said softly. "He didn't just leave me money. He left me purpose." Viewers, here's my question for you. Should Elena have exposed them publicly like this, or should she have stayed quiet and just lived well? Do people who betray you deserve to know what they lost? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know what you think. 2 months later, on a clear January morning with Mount Rainier visible in the distance, Elena gave birth to Gabriela Sofia Torres. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfection with her mother's dark eyes and a full head of black hair. She came into the world screaming with the kind of fierce determination that made Elena laugh through her tears. Miguel was there because family shows up. Patricia was there because chosen family matters too. And in the waiting room, 24 employees from Torres Industrial Group waited anxiously for news, because Elena had already shown them what kind of leader she was, one who valued people over profit. Brett had texted asking to be present for the birth. Elena's lawyer responded with the court-ordered custody arrangement. Supervised visits 2 hours every other weekend, child support payments that would be deposited into a trust fund Gabriela would never actually need. Brett could be part of his daughter's life if he chose to show up consistently. But he would never be part of Elena's life again. That door was closed, locked, and the key had been thrown away. When Miguel brought Elena home from the hospital to the penthouse she'd purchased in downtown Seattle, views of the Sound, 3 bedrooms, a nursery painted soft yellow with clouds on the ceiling, he found a gift waiting on the doorstep. A handmade blanket, clearly knitted with amateur hands, with a note attached in handwriting Elena recognized as Brett's. For Gabriella. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I know what I did is unforgivable. But she's innocent in all of this. I hope someday you can tell her that her father loves her, even if he failed her mother in every way possible. I'm sorry doesn't cover it. It never will. But I am sorry. Every day. For everything. Elena held the blanket, imperfect, with dropped stitches and uneven edges, but made with care, and felt something crack in the armor around her heart. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe never. But something softer than the rage she'd carried. What should I do with it? She asked Miguel, who'd stayed to help her settle in. That's entirely up to you, Prima, he said gently. But I'll tell you what Uncle Carlos told me once. Anger is heavy. Put it down when you're ready. Not for them, for you. Elena placed the blanket in the nursery closet. Not displayed but not thrown away either. A reminder that people were complicated, that mistakes were permanent, but that her daughter deserved to know her father had tried, even if he tried too late. 6 months passed. The Torres Foundation became a force of nature. Elena worked from home, Gabriella in a bassinet beside her desk, learning to balance motherhood and building an empire. The foundation helped 400 women in those first 6 months. Rent paid, job training provided, childcare funded, futures restored. Elena spoke at conferences, wrote op-eds, appeared on panels about women's economic empowerment. And every time someone asked about her story, about the ex-husband who'd left her for someone more successful, Elena's answer was always the same. He gave me the greatest gift possible. He showed me who he was before I wasted any more years on him. His loss. My daughter's gain. Our freedom. Brett showed up for his supervised visits. At first inconsistently, missing every other one with excuses about job interviews and apartment hunting. Kristen had indeed filed for annulment, which was granted on the grounds of fraud. Brett had lied about his financial stability. He'd moved into a studio apartment in Renton, was working at a tech support call center, drove a used Toyota with a dented fender. The man who'd left his wife because she wasn't enough, was now barely keeping his head above water, while the woman he'd abandoned was photographed for Forbes as one of the 30 under 30 philanthropists changing the world. But slowly, over months, something shifted in Brett. He started showing up on time to every visit. He arrived with diapers Elena didn't need, with baby food Gabriella wouldn't use yet, with children's books he'd bought at thrift stores. He sat on the floor of the supervised visitation center and made silly faces that made Gabriella laugh, her tiny hands reaching for a father she was just learning to recognize. Elena watched through the observation window sometimes, Miguel beside her. He's trying, Miguel observed. Trying doesn't erase what he did, Elena said. No. But it might matter for Gabriella someday. That he didn't give up. That he kept showing up even when he had nothing to offer but presence. Elena knew Miguel was right. Her father had taught her that everyone deserves a chance at redemption, though redemption doesn't mean restoration. Brett could become a better man, a decent father. But he would never be her husband again. That ship had sailed, sunk, and been swallowed by the sea. 1 year after her father's death, Elena stood at his grave on a sunny afternoon, Gabriella on her hip, babbling happily about the birds and the flowers. She'd commissioned a beautiful headstone, simple but elegant, with his name and dates and the inscription, El Mejor Papa del Mundo. You taught me that love is the only wealth that matters. Hi, Papa, Elena said softly, settling onto the grass beside the stone. I brought someone to meet you. This is Gabriella. Gabriella Sophia, Sophia for Mama. She has your eyes, did you know that? That same warmth that makes people feel safe. Gabriella reached toward the flowers Elena had brought, California poppies, always poppies. You were right about everything, Elena continued, tears sliding down her cheeks. Brett left exactly when you said he would. And it hurt, Papa. God, it hurt so much. But you were right about that too. Him leaving was the greatest gift. Because now I know. Now I understand what you were teaching me all those years. She shifted Gabriella to her other hip. The foundation has helped 847 women so far. We've prevented 23 evictions. Helped 156 women leave abusive relationships. Funded education for 94 single mothers. We're opening a second shelter next month in Tacoma, and a third in Spokane by year's end. A breeze rustled through the trees, and Elena swore she could feel her father's presence, proud and approving. I'm not angry anymore, she said. I was for a while. Angry at Brett, angry at Kristen, angry at the universe for taking you. But you taught me better than that. You taught me that anger is heavy, that forgiveness isn't for them, it's for me. That the best revenge is living so well they become irrelevant. Gabriella made a cooing sound, and Elena kissed her daughter's head. Papa? Brett's trying. He's showing up for her. He's not the father I hoped she'd have, but he's trying to be better than the husband he was. I'm letting him, not for him but for her. Because you taught me that everyone's story can have a second chapter if they're willing to write it. She stood, brushing grass from her jeans. I miss you every day. Every single day. But I feel you too. In every woman we help. In every choice I make with integrity instead of anger. In the way I'm raising your granddaughter to know her worth doesn't come from her bank account, it comes from her character. Elena placed the poppies on the grave. Thank you, Papa. For everything. For the money, yes. But mostly for the lessons. For showing me that real wealth is love, that real power is choosing grace, that real victory is becoming someone so magnificent that the people who tried to diminish you realized too late what they lost. She walked back to her car, a sensible Volvo because safety mattered more than flash, and strapped Gabriella into her car seat. As they drove away, Elena looked in the rearview mirror one last time at her father's grave on the hill, surrounded by flowers and sunshine. Your abuelo was a billionaire, Pequeña, Elena said to Gabriella. But that's not what made him rich. What made him rich was knowing that the only thing you take with you when you die is the love you gave and the lives you touched. Everything else is just numbers on paper. Gabriella laughed, and the sound filled the car with something worth more than all the billions in the world. 5 years later, Gabriella started kindergarten at Lincoln Elementary School, the same school where her grandfather's foundation had built a new library and computer lab, where children from low-income families could access resources that would change their trajectories. Brett showed up for drop-off, watching his confident daughter skip into the building wearing a backpack almost as big as she was. Elena stood beside him, not with him but beside him, both of them parents if nothing else. She's amazing, Brett said quietly, his voice full of wonder and regret tangled together. Yes, Elena agreed. She is. Elena, he started then stopped. There were things he wanted to say, apologies he'd rehearsed 1,000 times, explanations for the inexplicable. But what was the point? His actions had spoken. Her response, grace instead of vengeance, building instead of burning, had spoken louder. I was an idiot, he said finally. I threw away everything for pride and ambition and... Brett, Elena interrupted gently. I've made peace with what happened. I hope you have too. We're not friends. We'll never be what we were. But we're Gabriella's parents. That's enough. He nodded, understanding that was all he'd ever get. And honestly it was more than he deserved. Elena watched her daughter disappear through the school doors, then turned to leave. She had a foundation board meeting in an hour, a lunch with a senator about expanding programs statewide, and a dinner date with Miguel's brother Javier, who made her laugh and treated her like she was precious. Her life was full. Her heart was healing. Her daughter was thriving. And somewhere her father was smiling. That night, after Gabriella was asleep, Elena sat at her desk and opened her laptop. She'd been writing letters to her daughter, documenting the story, the lessons, the truth Gabriella would need to understand someday. Dear Gabriella, someday you're going to ask about your father, about why we're not together, about what happened. And I'm going to tell you the truth, all of it. Not to poison you against him, but because you deserve to understand. Your father left when I needed him most. He chose ambition over love, appearances over substance, someone else's 6-figure salary over my character. And it devastated me. It broke something inside me I wasn't sure would heal. But then I remembered what your abuelo taught me. You are never alone. You are never poor. You are never powerless. And Mija, he was right. Your father left thinking I had nothing. But what he didn't understand, what he'll spend his life understanding, is that I had everything that mattered. I had your abuelo's love, his wisdom, his protection. I had strength I didn't know I possessed. And I had you, growing inside me, giving me a reason to rise when all I wanted to do was fall. I could have destroyed your father. With the resources your abuelo left me, I could have ruined him completely. But that's not the Torres way. Your abuelo taught me that revenge is empty, that the best victory is becoming so magnificent that your enemies become irrelevant. So that's what I did. I built a foundation that's helped thousands of women. I raised you to know your worth comes from your character, not your bank account. I chose grace over bitterness, building over burning. Your father is a good man now, not because I forced him to be, but because losing everything taught him what actually mattered. He loves you. He shows up for you. That's not nothing. But Pequeña, when you're old enough to understand all of this, I want you to know. Never shrink yourself for someone else. Never hide your light to make someone comfortable. Never let anyone tell you you're not enough when you are everything. The right people will celebrate your fullness. The wrong people will leave. Let them. Their exit makes room for your rise. Te amo más que todas las estrellas en el cielo, mamá. Elena closed the laptop and walked to the window. Seattle sparkled beneath her, a city full of possibility and pain and people just trying to survive. She'd been one of those people once, broken, pregnant, alone. Now she was building something her father would be proud of. Not because she had money, but because she'd learned what he'd spent a lifetime teaching her. Real wealth is measured in lives touched. Real power is choosing grace. Real victory is rising so magnificently that the people who tried to break you are forced to watch from the ground while you soar. So if you've ever felt abandoned, betrayed, or told you weren't enough, listen to me carefully. Elena Torres's father was worth $6.3 billion, but that's not what made him rich. What made him rich was raising a daughter who knew that her worth wasn't tied to her bank account, who knew that character matters more than cash, who knew that the people who leave you are often doing you the biggest favor of your life. Brett Sullivan divorced a billionaire because he thought he was trading up. He left a woman carrying his child because her father was just a construction worker. He married his mistress 21 days after his father-in-law's funeral because he thought he'd escaped poverty for success. And he was wrong about everything. Now here's what I need from you. If this story moved you, if Elena's journey resonated with something in your soul, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stories like this, stories about real people surviving real betrayal and choosing grace over revenge, these are the stories that need to be told. Your subscription helps us keep sharing them. Second, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, Lagos, New York, London, Chicago, wherever you are, and answer this: have you ever lost someone who loved you more than life itself? Someone who protected you even after they were gone? Tell me about them. Honor them. Because this story is for everyone who's ever been loved by someone who saw their worth when nobody else did. Third, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. We all know someone who's been told they're not enough. Someone who's been abandoned when they needed support. Someone who's been underestimated because people couldn't see past appearances to recognize real value. Send them Elena's story. Let them see what's possible when you choose to rise instead of revenge. Remember this: you are not defined by the people who walked away. You are not diminished by those who couldn't see your worth. You are not less because someone was too small to appreciate your greatness. Elena signed those divorce papers with tears streaming down her face, thinking she'd lost everything. She had no idea she was about to inherit $6.3 billion and build a legacy that would change thousands of lives. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the thing that saves you. Sometimes the people who abandon you are clearing the path for your destiny. Sometimes you have to lose everything false to find everything true. Elena's father said it best: you are never alone. You are never poor. You are never powerless. Even when it feels like the world is ending. Even when you're signing divorce papers at your father's funeral. Even when the person who promised to love you forever walks away like you meant nothing. You are stronger than what tried to break you. Your worth was never up for debate. And the best revenge? The best revenge is living so beautifully that the people who left you spend the rest of their lives understanding the magnitude of their mistake. So subscribe, comment, share. And remember, dignity isn't something that can be taken, only given away. Stop giving it to people who don't deserve it. Thank you for watching Elena's story. More powerful stories of survival, strength, and redemption coming soon. Until next time, remember, you are never alone. You are never powerless. And the people who leave you? They're just making room for the life you were always meant to live. Now go build your empire. They're watching.